Okay, so I am going to turn it over to Chaitanya and Kyley for the presentation on Bayard Rustin.
All right, that's Bayard Rustin, and this is no presentation. Next slide.
All right, so Bayard Rustin was an openly gay man, which is pretty, let's say, not viewed as good in the time that he was around, you know. So, No, we landed on points.
So, obviously, since being gay at the time was viewed as very controversial, he was silenced, threatened, arrested, beaten, fired, and imprisoned. Also, he was like a black activist, which didn't help his view in the public.
Yeah, he was a big follower of what Gandhi was doing in like the 45, like 47 in India, and so he like kind of took that whole nonviolence thing and like applied it to Martin Luther King. Like he helped influence like a lot of what King did, and that's not really talked about because, like as we said, he's been openly gay, and that's why he's been silenced.
He was a leader and helped initiate the 1947 Freedom Rides, which was pretty much just a protest against segregated buses, which he ended up getting in prison for and then put in a chain gang with a couple other people because they resisted going to the back of the bus or giving up their seat for a white man. So yeah.
He founded the SCLC, which I honestly don't know what it is. It's not read by both points.
Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Yeah. And okay, CORE is like the Congress of Racial Equality, and like those two like organizations were like the big like groups that mobilized support for the civil rights movements, and CORE did like the freedom rides in the 50s, and so kind of set up like the precedent for that to kind of happen. And
he was part of the Communist Party for a while, which again, very controversial at the time, obviously did not help his image.
yeah, that's pretty much it.
Alright, so one of the main things he was known for, not known for, was the March on Washington in 1963. So he was a chief organizer during that time, and he kind of helped get everyone to like know about it, organize like the buses and all that stuff. But again, since he was openly a communist, wasn't really put at the headlines of it. It was more of Martin Luther King Jr. and his speech.
It was also organized by Philip Randall.
Yeah, how we kind of like got it to work together is that he would like mobilize these civil rights leaders and then like labor organizations and religious organizations to like churches and to gather like people from different areas, because like there was a couple 100,000 at the March on Washington, 250,000, yeah. And so to get that many people there, you got to do a lot of mobilizing, and so he did a lot of that grunt work, and he's not really recognized for it.
The results of this were like the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and the Selma voting rights movement, so obviously it's very influential. You might skip one.
Yeah, so pretty much, okay, that's fine. Okay, all right, so a lot of people thought that the March on Washington would turn super violent, and a lot of people did not like that. A lot of civil rights activists actually did not want for them to do it because of the chance it would turn violent. So one way they prevented that was they had the help. They went to like officials and they had help from officials and like made sure that nothing bad was gonna happen, or tried as much to prevent nothing bad was gonna happen. So yeah. Next slide.
Okay. Well, okay, yeah, we can talk about. Wait, hold me. Go back to the last picture. Really, we just.
A lot like Marshall P. Johnson, who was just talking about, Bayard Rustin was kind of forgotten about because of his identity. What we're getting at is the idea that you kind of had to, for a long time, project a certain image to be at the forefront of the movement, which thankfully is changing.
Yeah, it's just kind of like that whole politics respectability, like why Rosa Parks was kind of like chosen to be the forefront of the bus boycott instead of like Claudette Colvin, because like when you're presenting this image to like white society, you got to be considerate about like how it's going to be receptive, and so having to play around that means that people like Bayard Rustin and Marsha and Claudette Colvin can push it aside, and they do a lot of this important work, and that doesn't get often noticed, and so that's kind of like our point with this picture here. Yeah, or not the picture, but the content of the slide.
Presentation.
Yeah, presentation, yeah.
Any questions?
Yes.
I'm curious about, so his activism after the 1960s, was he active for the rest of his life?
Yeah,
He's not still alive.
No, he died in 87. So he moved to more gay rights activism later on in his life, kind of helped with the gay rights movement and all that stuff. But still was prominent in some black activism.
Any other questions for our group?
I'm kind of interested in that idea that you brought up between the two, that they're not the right face for the movement or something like that. You might not be able to answer this, but there seems to be maybe a couple different motives for that. One being just pure prejudice within the community or within the movement. The other one being, sort of a practical idea of gradualism, where we need to convince people that we're less dangerous to American culture or something like that. Have you thought about that, and to what degree, or what the motives are behind the exclusion?
Yeah, I guess the idea is kind of, it happens at a couple of levels. First of all, historically, we tend to think about the more like respectable people in the movement, people like Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks. And second of all, those people are kind of placed at the forefront of the movement because they're less controversial. So, like you said, the idea of like Martin Luther King wasn't as big a leap forward as Bayard Rustin would be, because Martin Luther King was like, a straight guy and a preacher. Bayard Rustin was gay and momentarily a communist, so the image there is a lot different.
Yeah.
What do you think about that rationale? Is it a good rationale? Is it an effective rationale?
I'm not really, I guess it's kind of hard for me to say it's a good rationale because it seems kind of messed up that someone like Bayard Rustin could be forgotten when he did so much good. And when a step forward requires, burying people in history, it's probably not a huge step forward. Although, on the other hand, obviously, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks did a lot of good.
Yeah, it kind of has to do with like the nature of circumstance. Like obviously it is not good that he was pushed to the side, but like white society kind of just like creates the condition where like it kind of has to be that way, at least in the moment. And so like I guess like the reason King is like up there, and even like with King, because like he had some policies and things that he talked about that wouldn't be well received by the public, and those things are also all pushed down. And so I think it just kind of has to do with like the environment of what needs to be put out there, and then as soon as it's like not well received by the white public, then King or Rustin or whoever just gets either shot or pushed away.
So I read that the communism, being part of the Communist Party was a really big part of them not allowing him to be at the forefront because they thought that would tarnish their image in the movement.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, it wasn't like super popular at the time, pretty frowned upon. I don't know, was he part of the Communist Party while he was working on like the March on Washington?
He was part of it for a little while, and then like split from him, I think.
Right, okay.
It kind of makes a difference when he was a part of the Communist Party.
I read that that's why Martin Luther King let them march with them
Yeah.
initially because of that Communist Party.
A lot of people were members or fellow travelers
Yeah.
earlier in the century.
Okay, oh, yeah.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate that you guys have brought forth a presentation about Martha P. Johnson and Bayard Rustin, because I've never actually heard of these folks, and so I'm wondering what circumstances do you think exist now that give space for folks like this to be recognized or rediscovered?
Well, I mean, obviously our thinking on it has evolved a little bit, so we're not so anti-communist or anti-gay that we can look back and say, hey, maybe these people should have been at the forefront of the movement when they did so much good. That being said, though, it is difficult because they're not remembered and they don't show up in history books or there's not movies made about them.
Not yet.
All right, well, I would like to thank you all for